Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Heavy Lifting Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Samuel. Samuel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Now, you used to run and operate Busy Beeline Movers. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, how you got into the moving industry, and all of that fun stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I started on a truck. I literally started from the ground up. Um, it was just this one summer that my friend, he was like, I'm working at this moving company and I hire everyone who's there. I'm like, all right, sounds like I'm a shoe-in. So, yeah, I started working with him. He was a super cool dude in a band, and I was like, all right, this is kind of like cool. I get to hang out with my friends while I like get a free workout, you know? So that's how I started. And I eventually got to know the owner at that company really well. And he was like, wow, you're good at this and you're good with people. Why don't we just partner up? And, the guy who had hired me eventually left. So then I was the one who was hiring everyone. I was the one who was dealing with all the clients. I was the one who was, making sure that some of the finances were getting taken care of on the employee side as well. So, I signed on as his partner. He wrote me into the agreement, and that's how I got my start in like the moving industry. And that
That's
all happened over the course of about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years.
Sounds like you must have been doing a pretty good job if it all moved so fast from
It did, yeah,
never having any moving experience to being a joint partner in a business in a year and a
for
half is
sure.
something to be proud of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you.
And what did that look like in terms of your responsibilities? I'm sure to begin with, you were sort of on every move. Then it sounds like you took over a lot of stuff. You took over hiring, you took over sales by the sounds of it, dealing with those clients. What did all of that look like?
Yeah, I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I was responsible for a lot, so we had to figure out a lot of the back end systems. We were just using the Google Suite, and a lot of that was doing just fine. It's just like sharing calendars, making sure that everyone had all the information that they needed. A lot of it was communicating with, um, the guy that started the company. His name was Brendan. Um, just communicating with him a lot about the conversations that he was having with all the clients that he was talking to, and then putting that information onto the calendar, and then making sure that all of the crew leads got that information. So just like a lot of logistical stuff that you see like in your average movie company. Just like not as much systems were in place when I first started working with them. So it was a little kind of chaotic in the beginning, trying to make sure that we had standard operating procedures for each part of the business.
That's something I was going to ask. Is it sounds like to begin with, you were wearing a lot of different hats and you were juggling lots of different things. There weren't too many systems in place. It sounds like you sort of brought that order to the business so that you could grow.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to it. It was like, well, this isn't working, this isn't working. Keep this, but this isn't working. So it was a lot of like, well, this is what we know we should be doing. How do we make sure that we actually are doing it every time? And who's being accountable for it? Because a lot of times what happened in the beginning of the business was everyone gets into a room. Let's have this meeting. Let's talk about everything. And then we leave the meeting and then nothing actually gets done. So, it was kind of tough until we could put things on paper and make sure that there was accountability to sort of get things done. So that was definitely the first hurdle.
That's huge. And
Yeah.
accountability in the moving industry is massive. For any team you're building, accountability is super, super crucial. Now, is that the same business that you're still operating today, or was that just sort of your original introduction into the moving world?
That was my original introduction into the moving world. What actually ended up happening is that my partner passed away tragically, unfortunately. And it was kind of tough for me to
Right
get
here.
the rest of the business because I was only like a percentage owner. So his family, it was like, I don't know, the laws in America and in New York State are kind of tough for probate. So I just ended up opening up an entirely new business with a lot of the assets that were left behind from that business.
That must have been really tough,
That was
having
very
sort
hard.
of something come so unexpected all of a sudden. having to deal with that, the probate, all of that sort of stuff. And I'm sorry to hear that your partner passed that way. But then opening up the new business, that's Busy Beeline Movers, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how was that, building it from sort of the ground up? That was your first time, having zero customers on your base. What did that look like at the very beginning when, you were just starting to get moves in through the door?
Well, we had the advantage of the names that were the same. I was able to take the phone number, use the same phone number. I was able to take the website, use the same website because it was a close enough name. We just changed it from Beeline Movers to Busy Beeline Moving and Carriers. And then I actually was able to keep the Google My Business page. That was actually a huge headache. But since I was already an owner of the the one company, I was able to transfer it over to the new name, even though I still had a suspension period, which I was freaking out about for like a month and a half. I was still able to, change it over to the new name and get a bunch of customers to the door because that's really like that was the scariest thing for me. I didn't want to start from scratch. I wanted to use our like we had 60 reviews back then and they were all 5-star, and I wanted to be able to use that to, advertise. So I was able to do that. Very happy to do that. Now we have 290 reviews on that page, which is amazing.
Amazing. And I'm really happy to hear that they let you keep your Google Business Profile because we deal with Google Business Profiles every single day. And most of the time it's smooth sailing, but when it goes wrong, it's just like all hell breaks loose because it's so important for you to bring in business. It's your digital business card at the end of the day. I'm happy that they let you transfer the business name and everything. And it
Yeah,
sounds like even though your account was suspended for a little bit, it was still a happy story at the end of the day.
for sure, for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, to get to just shy of 300 Google reviews in and of itself takes some finesse. How do you get most people to leave you Google reviews? Is that at the end of a move you bring it up? Do you bring it up during the middle of the move? How does that process look like to get so many 5-star reviews?
Um, to actually ask for the review is really easy. Make sure you're doing it right as you're finishing up with the move. Um, I find that has the strongest reliable feedback. Like, they're gonna, and they're also recent. And if we're actually there, like my movers are licking them in the eye and like asking for the review, it's really strong. But it starts even before that. You want to have good customer service. You want to have quick customer service. You want to be able to also make some of your interactions that you're having with the clients feel a little bit more authentic. And also the last thing is also the movers need to actually show up and deliver a good product. Like your service is going to dictate that, whether or not you get a 5-star review or a review at all. So it's like you got to educate your movers on what that looks like. And then there has to be incentives. If you don't incentivize things that you're asking for, you're probably not going to get good results out of your movers. So anytime that someone gets a review, and their name is mentioned, they're eligible to receive compensation. So it's like, $10 here, $20 here, depending on how big the move was. And if their name was mentioned, I gave them more. That's something that we instituted when we first started the review process. So
I'm really glad you brought that up, is the point of incentives, because a lot of moving companies forget to do this. You go from being the owner operator, you're doing everything yourself, you're on the moves, and you have an incentive to ask the customer for a review. But then when you grow out your team and you have multiple crews going out, you need to make sure that your interests are aligned. I think that's always so crucial. And it sounds like you are paying your guys for every review they get through the door, and you have a couple different things. For example, if their name is listed, you'd pay them extra. Would you also pay them extra if there was a picture or something? Anything along those lines?
yeah, it was just if their name was listed, they get paid extra. I also tried to explain, at least to the crew heads, the ones who are actually getting the reviews. I would give them a card with a QR code on it. The QR code would go directly to the review that I wanted to get from them. We did a little bit with with Better Business Bureau, but mainly it was with Google reviews. And there was a little space that said you were moved by, and then the movers would write their names in, hand the card over to them, and then they would mention the names in the reviews. And I also explained to the movers, hey, listen, like the more reviews that you're in, the more I'm gonna value you as an employee. That means I'm gonna put you on more jobs. I'm gonna think about you when certain things come up, and it's like we had a piano, and I see that in the review, and it's like John moved my piano amazingly. It's like now I'm gonna go to John for all the piano moves, and he just gets bumped up. So it's a way for them also to make an impact with me, who's going to be scheduling.
I love that. And it's so crucial to have that communication with your team is you want to let them know what's important for the business, what's important for them as well, because you want to see them succeed. And it sounds like you've done a really good job at that. Now, with Busy Beeline Movers, how long have you been operating now? 10 plus years almost?
Yeah, actually, Busy Beeline Movers was operating for about 4 years. Beeline Moving was operating for about 8 years with me and my partner before he passed.
Okay, so
Um,
it's been 12 years between the two. And how large have you grown Busy Beeline Movers to be now in terms of how many trucks do you have, how many moves a month, crews, all of that fun stuff?
yeah, I mean, we can handle, or we were able to handle about I want to say we had about 4 moves per day that were large. I mean, like we could also like stack moves, stack the smaller ones and handle more than that. But we could handle 4 moves per day with the amount of crews that we had. We had one summer that we were pretty much doing that, you know, 3 to 4 trucks. I mean, at that point, you got to rent trucks because in the slow season, you don't need as many trucks. And I don't want to be paying insurance for trucks that are just sitting there. So the economics just worked out where, if you get really good deals with your truck companies, you rent for the summer and you can handle more moves. In the winter is a little less, but you know, still able, still have a big book of people who can work, who are crew members who know that in the winter it might not be as fast, but I might still call them.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, is that you don't have to buy 4 trucks straight away when you have your third truck. You can wait a little bit on that because, like you said, as we all know in the moving industry, you're going to have peak season, you're going to have slow season. And if you're buying a truck to sort of keep up with demand for peak season, what's going to happen with that truck when it's slow season? It's going to be parked at the storage facility or wherever it might be, and it's not going to be used. So it sounds like for the seasonal demand, you just rent as necessary. Who did you rent from mostly? U-Haul, Penske, any of those?
For like really small, really local jobs, we rent from U-Haul. For larger jobs that needed distance, we had an account with budget that was like we were grandfathering at a rate that was just like really good that no one else could beat. So we just rented from budget quite often. And then we also rented from Ryder a little bit, and we also rented from Penske because around 4th of July, it's like no one has trucks because all the companies around here are trying to like get all their fireworks everywhere. It's crazy. It's like one of the most biggest blackout dates in the whole season. And then the Amazon season too, like around Black Friday and Christmas and stuff like that. It's harder to get trucks. But it's a little easier because it's not as busy. The 4th of July one falls right in the middle of summer. So that's when we start renting from Ryder and Penske.
And you do it way in advance because you know you're going to need it. And it's interesting because you're right. There are so many options. You've got budget, you've got Ryder, you've got U-Haul, you've got Penske. And I urge anyone who's listening to this as a moving company owner, if you haven't tried out different ones, try them all out. They all have their ups and downs. One of them might have faster support, one of them might be cheaper, but they're all going to have that. And it sounds like you are grandfathered in with budget. So I'm happy to hear that. We had a similar situation with our moving company in Miami, is that yeah, with our local U-Haul, they saw us all the time. They gave us special rates. They took really good care of us. So it varies depending on all of that. I'm happy to hear that. And sounds like at the peak of the business, you had around 120 moves per month, which is amazing. You said you used to have that. I think,
Yeah.
if I understand correctly, did you end up selling the business? What did all of that look like?
Yeah, I sold a lot of the assets. I held on to the Google My Business page. I'm just kind of like transitioning out of that, and but I'm still working in the industry. So every single day I answer phone calls, I do sales, I book jobs and moves just for a company, a different company that I end up selling a lot of the assets to because I want to start working on an app and doing things that way. And you know, that's that's the direction I'd like to go in, and I can't be. It was really tough for me to do the day to day of the moving company and the amount of responsibility that was on my shoulders, and then also trying to build this app. So I decided that I don't know if it was the best decision, but it felt like the right decision to, uh, just focus on sales for another company. And I'm really excited about what this app that I'm building can do, and I just found an engineer that can help me out with it, and now I'm even more excited about the direction that it's going. So
So yeah, and I'd love to dive into the app as well. But before we hop into that, I'd love to talk about the business decision to sell the assets. Had you
yeah.
grown a little bit tired of the moving industry too, or was it just that you wanted to put all of your time and focus into building the software? What spurred that decision?
Yeah, I don't think I'm tired of the industry yet. I mean, like, it's very easy to get tired of the industry because it is tiring. It requires a lot of focus. It requires a lot of effort. And then, you know, once you put in all of that focus and effort and you pay enough of your ignorance tax and you realize that it is just going to be hard and that you need to just do the work, you get to a point where you're okay with doing the work. You're able to you're able to offload some of that to this team member, some of that to this team member, some of that to this team member, and you've cracked enough of the codes because that's kind of how it feels sometimes. You crack the code of marketing, and now you can offload that to a marketing company. You crack the code of dispatch, and now you have your standard operating procedures. I can give that to my dispatch personnel, and he's going to execute that well. You know, crack the code of sales, and now we run the sales script with another sales personnel, and they're able to either take an intake call, and I can do the closing sales call, or they're able to do the entire call themselves. And then we go through the role playing and doing this and doing that to make them all better in every department. So
So then you get that oversight where you learn it yourself, you do the SOPs, you pass that on to the next person, and you get to see from a little bit of a top-down perspective. Now, it sounds like that's a pretty good situation to be in, but you still chose to sell those assets. Let's talk a little bit about the direction
yeah.
you've gone in, which is building out your own CRM for the moving industry.
hmm
What made you want to start there?
Um, well, part of it was that, you know, I had I had another partner once upon a time who told me that I should be using every part of the moving software, the CRM that I was using at the time, literally every part of it that I possibly could. So I decided to learn every part of it that I possibly could and even use things that I thought were silly. It's like, why am I using this? And then I realized, oh, this is actually a better way of doing things. It's keeping me more organized. There are things that I couldn't see in the future that would be important to me as I grew, that now that I'm already using them, it was a good thing. And I was happy that I took that advice. But invariably I got to a point where I was like, oh, I feel like I don't have this question. I don't have, like, I can't see this feature. Like, I don't know how big of a truck this is going to fit into because I can't see this at this section, or what point in the process are we at with the client? I want to be able to easily see that feature, or also with the AI tools that we have, it's like I can just upload a list and have it read that list. I'm excited to be able to play with those tools and build them into a proprietary system so that A, I don't have to pay for it, and B, also it's it's gonna be exactly what I want. There's so many little things that would be tough for me to describe right now that are features and and ways of working the calculations that I wish that I had in the software that I was using.
And that's amazing. It sounds like you're building something that the industry really needs, which is that you've used these different softwares in the past. You have the experience from actually running the crews, doing the sales, doing the marketing. You understand what's necessary within this CRM, and now you can build it out for the rest of the market. Now, I'm curious, which other CRMs did you use in the moving space beforehand?
I used Supermove for a little while, and I also used Smart Moving for a bit as well. So
And
those
in
are the two that I have the most experience with.
And you then decided to make your own, which of course is because you have more freedom over it. But what were those softwares really lacking that you decided, okay, rather than reaching out to them, trying to get them to build out a feature, I want to build this out myself? What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, the reasoning at first was purely financial. You know, if and I thought naively that I could do it easily. And then I got into it and it ended up turning out to be much tougher. But the more that I worked on it, the more that I saw how it's going to change everything. But one of the biggest features, and you know what the crazy thing is this, like even over the course of like primarily I was using Smart Moving. Supermove, I used them for a short period of time. Now they're so expensive. They're like $1,300 if you do 500 moves a year or something like that. They have plans, the packages based on how many moves a year that you complete. And but Smart Moving, it I used it for a really long time, and during that time period, they kept adding features and adding features and adding features, and I thought that that was really cool. Um, but one of the features that I didn't see them uh, focused on when I first started was the crew, you know the like at first they couldn't clock in, and then also um, I wanted to be able to have them clock in, have them see all the details on there, and also one of the biggest things that I'm putting into my software is courses, so that you can train the crew and be able to see track everything that like a crew member knows in the actual software, and be able to use that to either give them um, harder jobs and more responsibilities, or actually, help them to become, make more money with the company.
So that's interesting, and I'm very interested to talk about the different functionalities that you have built within the software yourself. But one of the ones you think is quite important is sort of training for the team and the staff. Did I understand that
Yeah,
correctly?
yeah.
And is that something which each different business is going to be able to upload their own training, or are you going to have training which is relevant for the moving industry and they can sort of work through it and see where their different new hires are within this training?
Yeah, basically they're going to be able to see it all on there. They're going to be able to create their own, but we're going to have some default templates that they can choose from as well.
Awesome.
And
Now,
I'm excited about that.
for moving companies who have never used a CRM in the past, whether that's because they're too small to afford a CRM or whether they have, they're doing those 100 moves a month, but they're doing it old school. What do you think the biggest benefits are of using a moving specific CRM for the business?
One of the biggest benefits is just all the pre-built features. It's built in a way that assumes that it's a moving industry CRM, and you don't have to build out any of those features. You don't have to, you can take a lot of the templates that are already built into a moving specific CRM and just run with it. I mean, all CRMs, they take a little bit of a learning curve to understand completely all the features. And sometimes when you build things out, you might build them in a way that's a little bit more complicated and then have to go in and edit things as you learn more features. But my hope is that I built a very intuitive, very simple designed CRM where anyone could understand it within a month to 2 months. I don't know if it's going to stay like that, but just to get it off the ground, you can go in there and you can just work in the customer section. You can create estimates. You can send these estimates out. You can see whether or not they paid their deposit, see whether or not they paid their actual price of their move. You can see profitability, and that's all going to be in this, one basic tab. And then if you want to go and explore dispatch and you want to go and explore scheduling and all that other stuff, you can look outside of that section, but it's very simple at first. And that's the way I think it needs to be, especially for people that you're going to give the software to and try to train them to use it.
I think that's super important. And you mentioned so many good things there, a couple of which I want to mention. First one is sort of your dashboard view, right? Where you can see, okay, how many moves have I booked this month? How much am I getting paid out? How much do I have on my accounts receivable? Which moves went badly? And I imagine you have all of this built out into the software. It's nice that you can see all of that and you can pull it up in an instant. And do you also have some kind of, or are you planning to build out some kind of accounting functionality in there so that people can run their accounting through this as well, or is that less important?
No, that's very important, actually. I mean, like, I personally see this is actually one of the things that I always was so frustrated with smart moving about, which is this, right? You, when you do your profitability statement and you're looking at whether or not the actual move made money, you should be pulling in as many expenses as you can. You know, that's the marketing expenses, the truck expenses, the crew expenses, maybe some tools and supplies. And then whether or not you had whether or not they're daily costs, you want to be able to automatically split them between 3 or 4 moves if it's a daily cost, so that you can really accurately see whether or not this move was profitable, this move was profitable, or this move was profitable. And then also, if there wasn't a move yesterday, if it was a completely empty calendar for, like, because it was a holiday or because you just weren't able to book anything that day, you wanted to pull the expenses off of that day. So in the accounting and profitability section for the software that I built, it does all of that automatically. And you can put that in the settings every time that you add a new expense. You can put in, oh, it's going to be 10% for workers comp. And then it'll automatically add that in based on the wages. So you can accurately see as soon as you hit close out the job section, you're going to be able to see, am I profitable today? And if you're profitable today, you know what to do tomorrow to fix that if you're not. And, you know, getting a clean picture is really tough. I bet 50% of most business owners don't know what the hell their numbers are doing. They just know if they're in the green or if they're in the red. But I bet you'd be really hard for them to tell you, like, on a daily basis, were you profitable yesterday? It's like, well, maybe profitable. I don't know. We'll see at the end of the month.
I think that number's probably a lot higher than 50%. And it's so important. I'm a numbers guy myself. It's so important to know what's going on with your numbers because if you have all of your numbers very clearly on one dashboard, you're going to know what's going wrong and what's going right. Are your expenses too high here? Is there a mistake here? Is this going well? Like even just your marketing spend to keep things simple, which of your marketing funnels are working best? Which one's giving you the best return on investment? And if you don't track the numbers and you don't have this all in sort of one clean software, you're going to struggle to find all of that. And the amount of man hours that you put into it, the stress that comes with that as well, you want to have this just neat and presentable so that you can find that information. Accounting season comes around, it's also much easier for that. You also mentioned scheduling. Tell me a little bit about the scheduling portion of the software and how that helps out moving company owners.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest frustration when I was doing when I mean, like, during the busy season, you go from having, you probably, I mean, there's been some busy seasons where I've leaned into marketing and I've literally doubled the amount of moves that we put on the calendar, and I doubled the amount of manpower that we need. And when you have such a big jump like that, you need to be organized. Like I need to know 4 days in advance that I have the guys ready to work, not only ready to work, but also that they're actually scheduled for specific moves. So I used to use Connect Team, which was great, but then I would have to copy this information over to this. Then I would have to copy, okay, now I did all my scheduling in Connect Team. Let me make sure that on my CRM, I have all the guys scheduled for that so they can see it in there so they can get into that system and they could also get into this system. And it's like, how many more systems do we need? And then I had a tracking software system where I had that, where I need to, make sure that that tracker was on that truck and this, there's so much organization that goes into that. Why not just have it all in one software? So what I am building into this software is you can schedule out, all of your movers can put in their availability. So you can see who you have on what days. And of course you can pester them and you can send out notifications and create automations for notifications so that they know, oh, put your availability in for the next 10 days for this on this day. And then you can create a draft of, like a rough draft of, okay, I have these 5 people that said they were available on this day. I'm going to put them all on this job. These 3 people who said they were available on this day. I'll put them on this job. I'll put these guys on this job. I'll put this job in the morning. This job is in the afternoon. That could be on the same crew. You can put all that in as a draft and then press schedule, and then boom, everyone gets a notification. They can look on their information. And then, each person has permissions. So the lead guys will be able to see all the most important information. And it's like, to be able to open an app and see everything and not have to text all of your movers and have them text you all of the time, asking you nonstop questions, that part was driving me crazy. And I needed a solution for that. And I didn't want to, pay, like, do a little bit on this app and a little bit on this app. And then, because that's confusing for the movers. There's like, how many apps do we need to figure out just like what the job is? Because this is an information heavy industry. And every single day is going to be like, you're going to need this information and this information, address, cubic feet, exact inventory, like the supplies that you need to put on the truck. Which truck are we using? What roads can't we go down? There's just so much. So I didn't want to put more on them. Just make it an easy thing. One app.
That scheduling tool sounds really, really helpful because, like you said, you have all of those logistics, talking back and forth with your guys, seeing when they're available, scheduling them in, paying them out. And that's the nice thing is when you have this all tied into one app, I imagine that ties in too. You have your crew lead say, okay, it took this many hours. Now you know exactly, okay, this is my hourly rate for my different guys. This is who's on the crew. Let's say it took 6 hours. I'm going to do 6 times each of this. And you can bring that through to the payroll. So I definitely see why there's so much benefit for having a software and a CRM, which really does a lot of this. Now, the last thing I want to touch on before I let you go, and thank you for sharing all of this very interesting stuff, automations. It's what can make or break a business, because you only have so many hours in the day. What sort of automations have you built into the software that will help the business owner?
So right now we have a few different specific automations. One is, well, the accounting automation is probably the most useful one that I would say. But there is a section where you can automate all of your follow-ups. And there's a bunch of different templates that I built in that I'm going to ship the program out with, where you can just pick from different responses based on different either automations that you want to create for your follow-ups, or just for triggered events. And it's pretty complicated, but there's a lot of tags in the program. So based on, like, for instance, if you want to confirm a move and you want it to just automate on its own, you can set that up to trigger a day before the move or 3 days before the move, which is really important. You can also set it up to, like, I think it was called distribution lists in Smart Moving, but basically you can set it up to fire out different text messages and emails to your team as well, reminding them to do things. You could also set that up for your crew members as well, reminding them to do things. For instance, if they have been on a move, like let's say it's an hourly move, and they've been on a move, and I find this is something that I always forgot to do, if I was in the office, which is just check in with them when the estimate it's getting close to the time that the estimate said that they were supposed to be done. Because sometimes your movers might just be in the thick of it, and it's like now you didn't check in with them, and it's 8 p.m., and you're like, what the hell's going on? And they're like, oh my God, they're going to hate me. They're like, they've been out there for 10 hours, and the client is going to be like, why is my bill so much? No, you put an automation in to the software so that it fires off a text message to the crew lead, just checking in with them, making sure that you're reiterating, how long the estimate was for and whether or not the move is going. Okay. So all of these things, like I said, I'm gonna ship this program out with a bunch of default templates. And if you want to go in and edit them, you can, but at least you have a working like model for how it's generally supposed to work together. And then you just plug in your tag. Well, you don't some of these tags you don't even have to plug in. They're just going to be plugged in already, and they're going to pull information off from that initial like onboarding that we'll do. And then also the information that you fill out in the system, it'll pull from that as well.
And that's huge. I think all of those sort of automations that you were discussing is just going to save everyone so much time. When you're doing that manually, one, it's a headache. Logistically, it's really difficult. There's going to be so much back and forth. You're going to be missing a lot of stuff, but to have this stuff trigger off automatically, and you also mentioned you've got templates in the system, the moving industry, cookie cutter is the wrong word, but a lot of these templates are going to be applicable. And then people want to add their own flair, you allow it to be slightly customizable. So I think that's really, really strong. And thank you for sharing all of this with us today, Samuel. I'm sure the audience will benefit a lot from these different things. Now, I understand the CRM isn't quite live yet. If people want to reach out to you to get to know a little bit more about the CRM, test it out, when it goes live, actually go ahead and move forward with the CRM, what's the best way to do that? Is that reaching out to you via a website you have? Is that direct phone number, email? What's the best way for people to reach you for that?
Well, I can say there's two ways. The best way, actually, if you want to be on our mailing list, you could just go to app.beelineworldwide.com. That's BEELINE worldwide.com. And that, if you want, you put your information in there, just your name, your phone number, your email address. And once we start getting really close to being done with it, we'll send out an invitation link, and we'll see if we can get together with people and just show them more features about it. The other way is that you can directly email me at beelinemoves@gmail.com. That's the letter B, LINEMOVES, beelinemoves@gmail.com. So those are the two ways you can get in contact with me.
Amazing. And what I'll go ahead and do in our YouTube when we do go ahead and post this, I'll put both of those links there with the email address and also with the website so that people can check that out. But as you can tell, Samuel's been in the moving industry 12 plus years. He knows what he's doing. He's building out a software. I'm sure he's looking for beta testers, people to use it out and stuff. So definitely join that mailing list. It's going to be super, super helpful. He'll teach you a lot about what is already going on, and I'm sure he'd appreciate your feedback. So, Samuel, I want to thank you again for joining us on the podcast, and I wish you have a great day.
Thank you very much. Can I add one more thing? Anyone who does want to be a beta tester, anyone who does want to be a beta tester, I can definitely, we're going to be offering them programs and deals for lifetime memberships. So if they can give us actual feedback and help us to build this thing and make it good, then the first few users who actually sign up, we're going to definitely give them, deals on lifetime membership. So I just want to put that out.
I love that. Need a great incentive for those first beta testers. You got to get the first proof. So really amazing stuff. You know where to find Samuel. Thanks again for everything.
Thank you, guys.